Everything that has been taught to us has been programmed within us. Welcome to the Staying Wild and Well podcast. My name is Rin, and my greatest accomplishment is being alive. Here we talk about life's journey, the ups, the downs, the in-betweens, all things mental health, body, mind, and spirit. We share wild stories and keeping your wild alive while staying well. Think about it for a second. When you were a little child and you did something, either your mom or dad would say, "No, don't do that," and suddenly that's bad. Or, "Good girl, good boy, great job, you did amazing," and you're seeking this validation, you're receiving this validation because you did well. What happens here is that we then decide what good and bad means based on what we have been programmed and taught to believe. It doesn't necessarily fall in alignment with us because we came to this world loving on ourselves. We came into this world looking in the mirror, blowing kisses at ourselves, the innocence. We don't know anything is wrong with us. In fact, we don't ever think anything is wrong with us until these beliefs start to get instilled within us. Our job is to self-actualize. Our job is to learn how to validate ourselves. And if we've never validated ourselves because we didn't grow up that way, most of us grew up just being validated. This is where the self-worth issues come in, you guys. This is why today, in today's episode on the Staying Wild and Well podcast, we are talking about worthiness. We are talking about this subject because it is so big. And I wanted to go into details and start giving you stats. I wanted to give you the nerdy stuff that I love, like the neuroscience. But then I'm also like, let's get real. You can give them some of it because I have my book here like I normally do, and I will absolutely give you some of the stats and definitely some takeaways, but I think I should tell you, it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter. You guys, I have been doing self-development work for 17 years. I've been working real hard on myself, and I show up as a journey coach for my clients. It doesn't matter how enlightened you are, how connected you are, spiritual, religious, what's that new cool trendy word, how woke you are. Oh my God. It doesn't matter how awakened you've become. You are never going to get past the fact that you are human, which means you are going to have a human experience, which means there are going to be times in your life where you are seeking validation, where you are questioning your own worth, and you have to reprogram all of this. This is our job, to die, for a part of us to die, and to then be rebirthed, to do the integration work of who we are in our becoming, to find ourselves and connect to our absolute truth. And what you'll find is the more you connect to your truth, the more the rumble within your environment starts to shake, because people don't necessarily love when you start to show up differently. I know that as I've connected more to my truth and reached inside to connect to my worthiness, people don't necessarily love it. They're saying, "You're changing, you're changing. Who are you?" Of course I'm changing. I am in a place of discovering and self-actualizing and connecting to my truth and coming home to me and finding that worthiness within me without having to seek it from anyone outside of me. We have not been taught to do this. How did I even know that I had self-worth issues? I mean, a lot of the times, and I will give you some stats or some ideas that you could understand that you might have some self-worth issues. But first, let me give you a little bit of a backstory on me, and maybe you can relate. So, growing up, I remember having a wonderful childhood, and my family always praising me and telling me to speak my mind and share how I feel. I think the biggest thing they drove home was speak your mind, speak your mind, speak your mind. Sometimes that gets me in trouble. But I speak my mind. But sometimes speaking your mind doesn't necessarily mean that you feel worthy. And I often thought because I have a voice, because I show up, it meant that I felt worthy. But what I quickly realized was, though my childhood was beautiful in many ways, into my adolescence it became very challenging. And what happened was, and if you've watched previous episodes, specifically the part 1 to my mental health journey, I speak to the fact that my mom had gone through depression and my dad had addiction problems with alcohol, and a lot had happened in a short period of time. And I was constantly seeking worthiness from my family, to be validated, to be seen, to be heard. And when all of this challenge happened within my family, I just wanted to be noticed. I was young and struggling, and my family didn't have the ability to show up for me in the ways that I needed, and that's not their fault. I think that's the thing I always tell parents, is that there's a really good likelihood that you will, no matter what, mess up your child, because why do I keep putting on an accent? There is a good chance, I did want to be an actress before. Not anymore. No, thank you, Hollywood. There is a good chance that you will mess up your child in some way, because we do not get to choose the way the child absorbs what's being said to them and the way they integrate that into their body and the storyline that they create with it. So naturally, as my family was moving through a lot of traumas, I wanted to be seen, heard, validated, and they didn't have the ability to do that. And I remember so much so that when I was unwell, my mother had said to a friend of the family, "Hey, can you help take care of my daughter? I'm afraid she's going to die." And though this person took me under their wing, and I'm so grateful, because I often think I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't for that person, I still wasn't being seen or heard from my family, and constantly seeking validation and holding on to my mental health challenges, because my hope was that if I held on to these and I was unwell enough, they would see me. And then I would be deemed worthy to be taken care of, worthy to be loved, worthy to be seen. That never happened. And I think that's what's scary thing, is that when we cling on to behaviors to hope that it will get people to show up differently for us, and we do things in order to connect to our worthiness, we'll never fully feel that worth, even if it was given to us. Because it's something internal that you're lacking within yourself. You could be flooded with it over and over again, and you are unable to fully accept it. So let me go on. How did I know that I had unworthiness issues and some self-worth issues show up? It was that, moving through the separation, you guys. Moving through the separation really showed me that I'm struggling. It showed me that throughout my marriage, I was constantly seeking validation in order to feel love, showing up with my partner, asking him if I'm a good wife, asking him if he loves me, cooking, cleaning, doing all the things that I could possibly do in hopes that he would deem me worthy, because a part of me felt unworthy because of the mental health challenges I had gone through or was going through with my OCD. So I would cook, clean the kitchen, bring him his snacks, do the laundry, do all these responsibilities, when all he ever really wanted was to just hang out with me. But in my mind, the story that played is, if I don't do these things, I'm not a good wife. If I don't do these things, how could I possibly be loved? If I don't do these things, how am I worthy of receiving his love? All while seeking validation, all while trying to reach for something over and over again and not getting it. And each time I didn't receive that love and that validation, my behaviors with my OCD would increase, because naturally I'm trying to fill this void of loneliness. And when I was outside of my marriage, I was able to stop and look at this and be like, this is why this showed up. And then I started to see the pattern in my friendships, especially because a lot of my friendships had ended. The way that I would cook and cater and show up for them above and beyond. Birthday gifts, being so extravagant and spending so much money on gifts and trying to, again, prove myself in a way that I was deemed worthy, that they would love me, going so far above and beyond my own capacity and putting myself out to hopefully be seen and be told, Sabrina's so great, we love her so much. And then I would feel this feel-good feeling that ultimately never really lasted. It would you do something for a friend, it lasts for a little bit, and then you're back to being a regular friend. All this time I was seeking this validation and this worth through my friendships, and it's no wonder a lot of the times I felt like there wasn't an energy share because I was going above and beyond. They were showing up in balance where I was stretching myself thin, which isn't necessarily healthy. So you could see how the dynamics of childhood bleed into the relationships we have. They bled into my marriage. They bled into my friendships. They could bleed into your work environment, just trying to be that perfectionist and going above and beyond and trying to make sure your work is perfect and putting your heart and soul into everything, which is beautiful. But if it doesn't go the way you wanted it to, suddenly you're questioning your own worth. So we all have a story. That's a little snippet of my story of worthiness. I think the journey towards self-validation and self-worth is a lifelong journey. We are human, like I said in the beginning, and we're going to continue to experience human experiences that make us question who we are. But if we can continue to grow and cultivate a relationship with ourselves that is strong and rooted in our own homecoming, that self-worth and that validation that you can provide to yourself continues to grow. I know mine has. And you start to attract connections and relationships that you didn't even imagine possible because you know your worth and you know the type of things that are acceptable and not acceptable to you, and you show up with more boundaries. I'm very passionate about this. Our job is to unlearn the things that we have been taught and to decide what good or bad is, or to neutralize, because good and bad is just a human word anyways. I know we have to have morals. I understand. But it's all words and stories created by us as humans. So now I'm going to give you some stats. The only real stat that I have is that self-worth issues really do show up, scientists say, show up around age 10 or 11. The mind is very influential at that age, and this is when we start to body compare. This is when we start to look at others, we start to compare ourselves. But again, it's so important to know that it's not necessarily you comparing that causes the lack of self-worth. A lot of the times, the lack of self-worth was inherited by people outside of us, so it doesn't even belong to us. It's passed down. It's belief systems from other people. It's not necessarily you sitting there and being aware that I have a body and now I'm comparing, or looking and hearing things from the media and then looking at your life. It doesn't necessarily have to be that way. It really could be what was imposed onto you, inherited generationally. So that's something to think about. Okay, so what are some signs that you are lacking self-worth? So I said seeking approval from others. You cannot give yourself approval, so you're constantly reaching. This is what I was doing in my marriage, constantly reaching. Am I being a good wife? Am I a good person? Do you love me? Do I look pretty today? Oh my goodness. When I step back and I'm like, you thought you were being cute? You had a lot of self-worth issues there, Sabrina. You had a lot of self-worth issues there, Rin. Sabrina being the egoic self and Rin being of spirit. I always try and connect back to her, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because she knows that she is worthy just by being alive. You are worthy just by being alive, but that doesn't mean it's going to show up in those ways. So seeking approval from friends, even though I acknowledge today that I struggle still with self-worth issues, as I'm having these big breakthroughs and discoveries and, oh my God, these aha moments where Spirit is like downloading into me and I'm like, wow, I'm just on a roll. I'll then send it to a friend. This is what I wrote. Seeking validation and worth from what I wrote and what I realized. It is sneaky. Self-worth is sneaky. It will sneak up on you. That is something I want you to look out for. Going above and beyond for others, that is constantly putting yourself out. Again, what are you seeking? Why are you doing this? Yes, I love to make people smile. That is something and a part of who I am. And I love gifting people. Again, that is a part of who I am. But are you going into financial deficit? Are you going through energetic deficit? If these are things that are happening and you're going above and beyond, like giving your 210% at a deficit, there's self-worth issues there. If you're super upset because people aren't meeting you where you are at and they're not showing up in the ways that you had, there's a good chance that they're balanced and you're not. And your self-worth issues are expecting that when you're showing up and giving 210%, that they'll recognize it, they'll see it, they'll validate you, and also maybe show up in the same way. It's not going to happen because the reason you're showing up this way is because it's driven by your lack of self-worth and search for validation. What else do I have here for you? Not having boundaries. You have no boundaries because if you place boundaries, maybe they're not going to like you. Maybe they're not going to talk to you, and you need them in your life in order to feel worthy, in order to feel loved. And God forbid you put boundaries down that make them question you or the love they have for you. Again, if you had self-worth issues, you'd be able to stand firm in your boundaries and understand why they're there and why people should respect them and stick to them. The hardest thing about boundaries isn't necessarily creating them, it's sticking to them, because there's so much motivation to move away from them if it means that you are going to be loved and that your self-worth is going to be fostered and remedied in some sort of way that makes you feel good about yourself. Negative self-talk. This is a lack of self-worth. We all have this negative friend, this jerk of a friend that lives in our brain. We all have it. You know exactly what I'm talking about. This person spikes up to tell you did a bad job. This person spikes up to tell you need to do better. This person spikes up and says, I can't believe you did that. I can't believe you said that. I can't believe you engaged in that. That jerk of a friend we invite in. The best thing you can do when looking towards regaining self-worth, regaining your own validation for self without externally seeking, is to start to silence these voices that make us believe we are less than. And how do you do that, you guys? How do you do that? And I'm going to do a totally separate episode on this. This is just real fast. You start to see them separate as you. It's your alter ego. What are you going to name these bad friends? What are you going to name them? That's why I connect to Rin as my spirit, Sabrina as my egoic self. They have a beautiful dance together. We do need the ego, but all these alter egos of bad friends, once you start to name them, you could start to question, when did they show up? Why did they show up? What are they doing? Why are they serving you right now? They're not, but why do they think they're serving you? By separating yourself from these negative voices, you could start to instill positive self-worth into you and start to question them and understand they are no longer you. Separating them will only help you move closer to yourself. Okay, what else do we have here? You might find it really difficult to accept compliments because you don't believe that about yourself. I've spoken about different connections I've had, and I know that somebody gives you a compliment, you immediately want to be like, this whole thing. Oh no, I didn't wash my hair today. Or, oh, thanks. You look great too. You have to follow it back up with another compliment because you want them to feel good too. If you're feeling good, you don't want to be too much. You don't want to take too much. Just accept the freaking compliment. Somebody sees beauty in you. Somebody sees something magical that maybe you can't see. Take that in and accept it. Thank you, universe, for providing this beautiful person in front of me to give me what I don't necessarily believe about myself, and take that and look at that and maybe recognize this is a part of my nature. Start to build your self-worth back up. People pleasing. That is also a really big one, you guys. If we're people pleasing, we are trying to find self-worth through doing this. People pleasing is not loving someone. It's fear that they're not going to approve of you, fear that they're going to think something of you, fear that they aren't going to love you, fear. And if they show up in that way, what does that mean about you? If you have enough self-worth, you understand that if you disappoint someone and they don't love you because of it, that's not the type of person you want in your life anyway. Like I said, you guys, I'm very aware of all of this, and I move towards this. It doesn't matter how awakened you are to your own experiences. It doesn't matter how much you know about self-worth. It doesn't matter. You're still going to be human and have a human experience, and triggers will pop up for the rest of your life. It's how you navigate them, how you question them, and how you see them. And I'm hoping this episode is helping you do the same. All right. What can you do to start to gain some of this self-worth? I have some notes here, things that I've already dove into. Number 1, setting those boundaries. People are not going to be happy. People are going to tell you you're different. You're going to have to not care. Take yourself on dates. I know I'm single. I'm single for the first time in 15 years. This is big. This is really big because all of my search for validation and love has been through my husband over and over again. I've been seeking. Being single. I'm excited, you guys. I'm going to take myself on dates and get to know myself on a deeper level and be able to provide myself with what I'm looking for. Not through friendships, not through romantic relationships, not through achievements in a career or a work environment, not through clients, but through the vessel of myself, my God-given body, my spirit connecting and knowing she is so worthy. That's the goal. Take yourself on dates. Take yourself on dates. Lean into kindness. Lean into yourself. Love on yourself. Remove judgment. Removing judgment is another one. If you want to start to cultivate worthiness, stop judging yourself. Kick those jerks, those bad friends out of your mind. Do not entertain them. See that they're there. Thank you. Don't need that today. Thank you. You can make your way out. Thank you. Removing that judgment and holding space for yourself. We live in a world where you will constantly be questioned. People will constantly try and make you doubt yourself. Stand firm and convicted in your beliefs. Ask yourself why you believe the things you do, and then stand in them and own them with conviction. You are worthy for being alive. You don't have to do, if today you leave watching this podcast and you still feel a lack of self-worth, that is okay. Because I'm going to tell you and I'm going to remind you that you showing up here, you breathing this beautiful air, Mother Nature, living in spirit, living on earth, living as a human, showing up in all your form, happy, sad, emotional, all the parts, you are worthy. You are so worthy. I am worthy. We are worthy. That's it. You don't need anything else. You don't need to do anything else. You don't need to be anything else. You just are. And you're worth it.